This is episode 52, and today we're going to talk about how to build a business that pays you before it costs you. So, we're kind of going to take it back to the basics here. Now, full disclaimer, I don't mean that before it costs you nothing. I mean, it's going to take a couple bucks to, get like a website up or, the basic little things. But no real investment, right? No huge investment on your part, no waiting for an investor, just really doing what it takes to get some things going and get some sales, right? Because cash flow is king, and we need to make sure that we're making sales at the end of the day. So there's a lot that goes into a business, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs are putting those things first before worrying about just making sales and really worrying about getting the MVP, the minimal viable product, out there to see if it actually works. And so today we'll talk about just some of the things that I think entrepreneurs get caught up in, as opposed to focusing on what matters. So, just like I always talk about, anytime an idea, a new product or service is purchased in the market and somebody actually puts their money behind it in the real world, that is what validates that idea. And you can do all the fancy stuff you want, all the fancy branding, and any of these other things that take time, take money. But unless you're actually making some sales, that's the only thing that's going to actually validate it. And that's what we want to be focused on. And a big part of that is the MVP, right? You want to make sure that you are using the minimal viable product at first, especially if this is a brand new service. Maybe people don't understand it yet. Maybe it's just a new concept. It's especially important in that case because you have to see if people even want the product or not. You have to see if there's even a problem that your product or service is solving. Maybe it just doesn't, maybe that problem isn't a big problem for people and you don't know it until you put it out there. So that's why we need to use the MVP. So we don't want to build out all kinds of crazy parts of our business before we know if our product or service works. Now, again, you're going to need to build out, like, a logo and a website and, things like that, a PayPal account or something to accept payments. But we don't want to go too far past that. We want to get the minimal viable product, the basic idea of what we have to sell out there, and see if somebody buys it, and then go from there. So, not kind of sticking to this is, I think, the basis of founding without funding, is why a lot of people don't start their business, because they think they need a lot of money, or they think they need to wait on an investor. And that's what this is all about. You do not need to wait on an investor. You can use your own money, just little tiny bits of money. We're talking about $100 to get a website and a logo and everything looking good, that type of thing. And you can do it for even less if you do it yourself. So very little cost to you. Don't need an investor. Don't need a huge investment from yourself either to get going and get something out there, and then get feedback of whether people buy it, whether they don't, why they bought it, why they didn't, your conversion rate. Hopefully, you have a little bit of money to put some ads out there as well, so that you can get the feedback, from the market, really. And, one of the things that I think entrepreneurs waste a lot of time and money on, thinking that they need to, is just the huge infrastructure of a business, and thinking they're going to need like a secretary or an office and things like that. And really what we need to focus on, especially in the beginning, is just cash flow and getting a minimal viable product out there, testing it, and hoping that people are actually buying it. And I think sometimes we feel that we need to build a huge infrastructure to execute that product or service before we even start trying to sell it. And that puts us in a bad position as entrepreneurs. If we don't even know that the product's going to sell and we've built out an infrastructure around it, it puts us in hot water. We're going to be losing money. We're going to be losing our time. And it's not a position that we want to be in. So we want to get that product or service out to the market as soon as possible, test it, get the feedback, and then go from there. So when we're looking at building revenue as opposed to building infrastructure. What we're talking about is getting out there and making sales. And so, even if you don't have everything automated on the back end, close a few sales, close a few transactions, and complete them manually in a more manual way, if that's what it takes, before you, spend a ton of money on infrastructure and automating some things. Now, of course, you should automate like the emails and texts that they get when they inquire about your product and all that stuff, but you don't have to go too much above and beyond that, and that's relatively cheap, right? So, you know, even if things have to be done manually, you can still put it out there and say, well, yeah, I don't have the system in place to automatically do this yet, but you don't necessarily have to build that out until you see some people order it. And then you can complete those one manually. Maybe it'll be a pain, but at the end of the day, you're doing it for a reason at that point because people are buying it. And so you get through those first couple ones manually, and then you need to actually build that system that's more automated on the back end. So don't be afraid to put something out there, knowing that you're going to have to kind of sledge through the first couple sales if you don't have something automated. Again, at that point, if a payment comes through and you have to manually go through this process, just be happy because it's for a reason, as opposed to for possibly no reason. If the product or service sells and you do it before you try to get out there, you automate everything, you build out the whole infrastructure on the back end, and then nobody buys it, or they buy a different, you have to shift so many times and pivot so many times that it's not even the same business or product or service. And now you're built out a whole bunch of infrastructure for nothing. So, really, one of the things we're talking about here today is sell it before you buy it. And this is something that we talk about a lot, right? Try to get out there with the product or service, try to get somebody to purchase it before you have to put in a bunch of costs on the back end, before you necessarily have to buy the material or the cost of whatever product or service that you're offering. So that's a big part of this, is selling before you buy. We want to get cash flow coming in before we do too much on the back end. So we definitely want to be looking for that sell before you buy, which personally, that's what jump started my career as an entrepreneur. Back when I was 15 and started my own business, I was able to get somebody to buy a product that didn't actually exist yet. And then I took that money to make it exist, right? And actually build it out. So you can't do this in a shady way. You have to really be able to do this. I could have took my own money if I absolutely had to get something right once they bought it. So it's not like I was going to leave them hanging because that little amount of money that they paid didn't cover it exactly, and I had $0 of my own to put into it. No, if I had to put a couple hundred extra bucks into it, I would, because that was the choice that I was making, to sell before you buy it. But in that case, it was perfect. I sold it, and then I used that exact amount to create that product or service, and then was able to sell more inventory on that same product or service and actually make a profit. And I didn't have to come out of my pocket at all. I actually had somebody purchase the first piece of inventory on that product, and then took that and was able to actually manifest the product and use that for the expenses. So I've definitely had a great experience with that myself, of selling before you buy. All right, let's go ahead and open it up to questions here then. Remember, you can always send in questions to at Founding Without Funding or at Kyle Hiersche. More than happy to, answer everybody's questions. I do have some questions here that are already sent in, and then you can ask any questions live as well. We do stream this on all the different platforms, so feel free to ask any questions live. Now, remember, if you are looking for help in starting or growing your business, go to foundingwithoutfunding.com and you can purchase the book there. It will definitely outline everything that you need to do. So foundingwithoutfunding.com to get the book. And then if you want to be a little more hands off with your business and have somebody actually do the work for you, as far as setting up your LLC, your logo, your website, your social media, running your social media ads, all that kind of good stuff. If you get the book, you can learn how to do it yourself. Or if you want to be a little more hands off, we can actually do that for you at yourdigitalbusinesspartner.com. So my team can set up everything for you and help you be a little more hands off on running your business. So go to yourdigitalbusinesspartner.com if you want us to help you out with that. And as I said, if you want to do it yourself, go to foundingwithoutfunding.com and get the book, and it will walk you through doing a lot of these things. Now, another plug here. Remember that you can join my team as a loan officer. So anybody out there looking to be a mortgage loan originator, a great profession, high paying profession, we can provide you with the best rates, the best outlets, and leads on top of that. So if you're looking for a career change, or maybe you're already in the mortgage business and you're looking for more support, more leads, you can go to newmlo.com. And if you're not licensed yet, we can actually help you through the process of getting licensed. So if you would like to become a mortgage loan originator on my team, go to newmlo.com. All right, let's go ahead and get into the questions then. So Jason is asking, do I need an LLC before I start selling? Not necessarily, but an LLC is so simple to set up that I would recommend doing it first. And then you can do things like when you set up, your payment processor, you're actually doing it through your company because you have an actual LLC, and that's not going to cost you anything. And the LLC it doesn't cost much, right? And then again, you can go to yourdigitalbusinesspartner.com and they can do it for you, right? But it's pretty easy to do, very cheap to do. So I would recommend setting up the LLC first. And again, that's kind of bare minimum, right? Set up the LLC, get a website up, and then get a product out. Don't build any more around that. Don't build a big infrastructure. Don't hire people. Don't get an office. Just get your paperwork set up, and get a product or service out there, which you're probably going to need a website to do, which is extremely cheap as well. Okay, Brittany is asking, is it risky to sell something before it's fully built? Well, I think it depends on your intentions, as long as you are going to execute it. And as I said, you could sell something before you buy it or before you build it, right? Sell before you buy, sell before you build, same thing, depending on what your product or service is and as far as the cost go. So, as long as you can execute it, even without more money, right? You can't rely on making 5 sales. And if you don't make 5 sales, then you can't actually build it. It's got to be as soon as somebody buys one, you have to be able to execute it. You have to be able to take that money, and maybe if it takes more money from yourself, you have to be able to execute it. So never put yourself in the position where you have to sell multiple things to be able to execute it. As soon as somebody buys one thing, you need to be able to go execute it. And if that takes a little bit more money out of your pocket to do, you need to be able to do it, or else you are doing bad business at that point. If you're setting yourself up to where, well, one person bought it, but I can't afford to actually execute until 2 more people buy it, and who knows when they're going to buy it. So that first person is left just hanging, and we never want to do that in business. Okay, Marcus is asking, what's the biggest early mistake you made that didn't produce revenue? I think like having speakers at events, like paying big speakers to come to events was definitely a thing that didn't translate into revenue. And it's not a situation where you could, sell before you buy. And so I think that was a learning experience. Let's see, Ashley is asking, how do I pre-sell something if I've never done it before? Well, that takes a little ingenuity, right? If you have never done something before, but you're going to need to learn how to do it, right? So again, if you're selling something before you buy it or selling something before you build it, you need to be able to accomplish it. You need to have done the research on exactly what it's going to take. And you should have documents that show this is the exact amount of money it's going to take me to execute this. And this is the exact amount of work. This is how long it's going to take for me to execute this. So you can't just go into it blindly saying, well, hopefully somebody buys this and then I'll figure it out. And then you go to figure it out and you realize it costs way more money that you don't have. And it costs way more time than you have to execute and get this person their product or service in the right amount of time. Then you're in trouble. You can't do that. You got to know exactly what's going to happen. As soon as that person buys it, you have to say, okay, I'm going to take that money, pay for this. I'm going to do this, and that. And then I'm going to deliver that product or service to that person. So don't ever get yourself in the position where you're not able to accomplish it. As soon as you make your first sale, you must be able to deliver that product or service. It's just that money might help you accomplish it, right? But everything else needs to be lined up as if you could already accomplish it with your own money. You're just hoping that somebody buys it first so that you don't necessarily have to use your own money. But you still need all the other pieces in place to be able to go out there and sell before you buy. Or in my opinion, you're doing bad business. If you don't know exactly what it's going to take to execute it, you can't go out there and sell it before you build it, because that's essentially shady business. So big factor there in following any of these types of sell before you buy, sell before you build type of models. Okay, Tiffany is asking, what if people say they're interested but won't actually pay? Well, you want to get feedback from people, right? So especially in today's day and age, hopefully you're running ads of some kind to get people into your, funnel. Hopefully you're putting them into a CRM, and you know you want to not, if people aren't buying it, you want to reach out. Why are they not buying it? Send them an email, send them a text, pick up the phone, give them a call. Hey, I see that you submitted, you were interested in the product or service. Are you still looking to do it? And if they say no, may I ask why? Trying to get some feedback on it. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is feedback, and then adjusting. So on yesterday's episode, we talked about adjusting versus pivoting, right? Adjusting is just kind of tweaking the offering that you're putting out there. Pivoting is kind of pivoting to a whole other direction. And so I don't think you need to pivot in that case, Tiffany. I just think that you need to kind of adjust things with the feedback you're getting. So if the market isn't purchasing, if nobody's purchasing it, then that's feedback right there. And then you want to call, text, email, find out why people aren't purchasing it and what you could do to make them purchase it, and then adjust. So not necessarily pivot to a whole other route, but just adjust as you get that feedback. And hopefully you can get people to start pulling the trigger on it. And then after that process, if nobody's still pulling the trigger on it, that's when you should decide, okay, we probably need to pivot to a different route. And maybe it's not a whole different product or service that you're pivoting to, but a whole different route about going about it, or a whole different branding, or whatever the case is, to try to pivot there. Okay, question here from Carlos. Why do you recommend services first instead of products? Yeah, so I talked about this on a previous episode. It's just that a product is difficult because you have to have inventory and you have to actually have the physical product. So especially when we're talking about like sell before you buy, sell before you build, it's just so much easier with a service, right? A service of some kind. Now, there's a lot of kind of hybrid things. There's kind of online products, or something like a book or something like that. So it's kind of hybrid between a product and a service. It's not necessarily a physical product that you have to create. Even a book, right? You create the book, and then Amazon or whatever is going to print it, whatever it is. So you're not actually sitting there having to put together books. But things like that, right? You want things where you don't have to physically build a product and then physically have a factory make it, and physically ship them out and things like that. That's not a good start. Right now, can you do it? Yes. And can you do it easier later with capital and clients and money already coming in? Of course, but it's not a good one to start up. It's not the easiest thing to start up, and it's definitely not the easiest thing. It's not what you want to sell before you buy and sell before you build, is really the gist of it there. Okay, question from Lauren. How do I structure a revenue share deal without getting taken advantage of? Oh, good question. I don't think I could answer that. I think that's more of like an attorney question, right? I don't know. I just would say that just have clear agreements. It's just really important to have clear agreements, to have contracts, especially in business partnerships and things like that. And especially, I talked about this with somebody yesterday, especially when you know the people, and especially when you're like friends or family. People think that's when you don't really need those agreements, but that's when you need them the most, really, because things happen and people argue, and when it's personal, things get personal. And when it's just so much better that everybody's on the same page of this. Nothing's being assumed. Nothing's being like, well, they did this and they should do this, and I don't, feel like they should get this. Everything is just so much easier when everything is on paper. Even when you know the person, it's a friend, it's family, it's a business associate you've known for a long time. Put everything on paper for sure. Contracts, outlines, business plans, these type of things of whose responsibility is what. Put those on paper so that everybody's clear. It's going to stop a lot of arguments later. And also, nobody wants to argue in their business, but really nobody wants to argue with their friends or family either, especially over business, right? Okay, we'll do the last two questions here. Brandon's asking, what if I don't have a big audience yet? So, well, there's two main ways to get a bigger audience in today's day and age, which is advertising. Typically, that's going to be probably Meta advertising on Facebook and Instagram or Google Ads, and then content. Those are the two big ones. How are you going to build an audience? You're going to advertise to get in front of an audience, or you're going to make content that's going to get in front of an audience. And the content is great because if it takes off, then you're saving so much money on ads, right? Your cost of customer acquisition can go down like crazy because you're essentially getting them for free. When something goes viral, you're getting all those views for free that you would have had to pay for if you were advertising. So the content route is much harder and much more long term, but it can be very lucrative because you can stop spending money on ads or stop spending as much money on ads because you're getting so much action for free. And so I think that's important to consider. I mean, those are, especially if we're talking about what I'm talking about today, some type of service that you could sell online, that you could sell before you buy, sell before you build. This type of thing, right? That's what you can really do this with. And you can really expand quickly if you have content that goes viral, way quicker than ads. But at the same time, ads are important because ads are steady, right? You can't count on content to go viral, but you can count on ads. If you can dial in your conversion rate, if you can dial in your cost of customer acquisition, for ads, then it's unlimited and you can scale it up, right? And it's guaranteed. It's not going to change the next day from $1 per lead to $5 per lead, just like it could if you were just relying on viral content, right? One day you get a piece of content that goes viral and you get crazy action for free. And then the next 2 weeks, you don't have a piece of content that does, much at all, and you're getting zero. So ads are important to dial in as well. But the way to kind of do it for free nowadays is content. But also don't think that content is really free because it takes a lot of your time. It takes a lot of time to put out a lot of good content. I'm talking about hours a day. But if you don't have money to put into ads, that's kind of your only option right now, right? Is to spend a few hours a day making a bunch of content, putting it out there, and hoping that you're getting some action from it. Okay, last question here is from Nicole. When is the right time to invest in branding and systems? Uh, uh, well, branding, it depends on what you're talking about. So, if you consider your logo and website branding, then you need that, right? You have to have that. Even if it's not an online product or service, like they have to be able to look you up somewhere, they have to be able to see you and know that you're a legitimate company with a website and hopefully a professional looking website. But as far as systems, I'd be careful. I would only be setting up systems that help you create sales, as opposed to systems about that are for executing the product or service after the sale. Right. First, let's focus on the sale, getting the sale, and then, as I said before, then focus on the systems to automate the back end of accomplishing it. And in the meantime, it's okay if the first few have to be done manually. It's okay if you don't have those systems set up to automate everything, right? That's okay at first. Just make those sales so that you're then going to turn around and make that happen. But in those first few sales, don't be afraid to just say, yeah, I'll just do these ones manually. It's going to be kind of a pain, but as long as somebody buys it, I'll figure this out manually, and then then I'll systemize it, right? But don't be afraid to just say, I'll just go ahead and do these and get them out the way. Now, to your question, Nicole, about branding, if branding you're talking about just spending money and stuff to get your logo out there, your brand out there, I talked about this on a previous episode a couple of days ago. I would run from that, right? Especially in the beginning. Focus on things that have a direct return, like ads. Focus on the things where you can measure the return and that can make sales. Branding like a billboard or sponsoring events or something like that, that is not going to bring back direct sales to you. So get out of all that kind of stuff. I know people love thinking of like themselves on a billboard or their logo on involved with an event or whatever it is. Yeah, that's all great once you're actually profitable and just kind of trying to brand yourself more. But especially in the beginning, put money into things you can measure a direct return with, and really stay away from that general branding type stuff, because that's not going to get you to where you want to be in the beginning, and it's not going to make sales, and sales are everything. Cash is king, and sales cure all. And so we want those sales rolling. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Remember, foundingwithoutfunding.com if you want to get the book. If you want to be a little bit more hands off and have somebody kind of build your business for you, your LLC, your website, your logo, run your Facebook and Instagram ads and all that kind of stuff, you can go to yourdigitalbusinesspartner.com and they can actually help you do that, so you can be a little bit more hands off on the process. But if you want to do the process yourself, go to foundingwithoutfunding.com, get the book, and it will help you do that. Or if you want to be more hands off, go to yourdigitalbusinesspartner.com and they can help you out with putting in that work. So with that being said, thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will go ahead and wrap it up. We'll see you on the next episode of the Founding Without Funding podcast.